But like Ellie said, and here's what's so important, you know, when you sit down and chat with somebody and you have this conversation, in the dialogue, you know, somebody doesn't believe what you believe and they challenge you with a question or they make a statement that you can't, you know, respond to. You know what? Write that down. When you are finished with that conversation, go and research it out. Listen, there are good resources that you can pick up. Great authors, great apologists, male and female, who understand, gone on before, and, you know, sort of paved the way, giving us insight as to why we believe what we believe. And we can then research that, make it part of who you are. And in doing so, I believe with all my heart, and I would defend this to anybody, that the Lord wants us to love Him with our minds, with our thoughts. The whys we believe what we believe. Yes, faith is incredibly important. And you know what, when it comes right down to it, anything one believes, it's by faith, and then we understand. In fact, Isaiah said that. But my point is, we can't just say, well, it's all by faith, shove everything else aside, because that ain't going to cut it. Jesus never modeled that, nor did the apostles. My point is this: if you love Him, then learn of Him. If you love the Scriptures, learn the Scriptures, because it's going to get, Paul told Timothy, worse in these last days. And folks, if we haven't got it together and we don't understand, when we start losing ground, don't blame anybody else, but that's right, ourselves. My opinion, you may disagree, but listen, statistics tell us that. Carlos, going to get you in just a moment, but I want to play this final clip here with Joe. And, you know, I asked him the question from the chapter in this book about how the evangelical church potentially is compromising. And I say compromising in that, you know what, we want to be relevant, we want to be sensitive, we don't want to offend anybody, so therefore we're in a sense recreating a more palatable Jesus for people to accept. And he never asked us to do it. But in asking Joe that particular question, does he believe that really that's what's taking place today in line with modern scholarship? Here's what he had to say.
Yes, I do. I do think that there are portions of the church today that, as has been the case for several centuries since the Enlightenment in particular, or what is called the Enlightenment, where various rationalistic philosophies and various critical theories of the Bible arose and began to call into question the authority of Scripture. And of course, once you do that, once you, in the name of human reasoning and human autonomy, start to question or undermine the authority of Scripture, then you can begin to make Jesus into pretty much anything you want. It's very interesting that actually at the end of the 19th century, where what is called modern biblical criticism began to arise, initially out of Germany, what was called the higher criticism, which is now regarded as passé and essentially irrelevant to modern scholarship. But at the time, it was actually seen as the saving grace of the Christian faith. The basic idea was that what was necessary was that in this sort of modern world, people surely couldn't really believe now, having had the Industrial Revolution and if you like, the triumph of humanistic philosophy and culture, people couldn't really accept things like the virgin birth or the resurrection or the miracles of Jesus. And so these scholars said, we need to demythologize the Bible. We need to find a way of telling the biblical story without all of these miracles. And of course, without the supernatural, essentially. Now, these were actually, the people who put these ideas forward were initially people who really claimed to be Orthodox Christians, people who, in some cases, believed themselves to be evangelical, who thought that this would help in the process of evangelism by filing off the supernatural bits that people couldn't swallow, like and doctrines that they might find absurd, like the Trinity or the two natures of Christ and so on. They thought if we can take these bits out, people would be more receptive to the gospel. And actually the consequence of that was the emptying of the church. The mainline denominations became liberal, and those churches have emptied across the Western world, that have compromised the faith. And now today we're seeing the rise of various new strands of liberalism. They essentially go back to very old ideas that were around in the 18th and 19th century in the form of deism, the idea that God's just a distant first cause who kicked the universe into motion but doesn't really have anything to do with it anymore, and Unitarianism, which denied the Trinity, and so on. And so there are modern ideas arising again within evangelicalism, within Orthodox Christianity, that are seeking to argue that maybe Jesus was, in fact, just a man, that perhaps the creeds of the early church were really influenced by some sort of Western imperial philosophical ideas, and that they reflected merely the culture of the time, and that actually these statements about who Christ is need to be reopened, that perhaps Jesus was really just a good moral teacher, he was an emancipator of the poor or the oppressed or whatever, and so the meaning and the work of the cross is redefined. These ideas sound new to many ears, but actually they're not new at all. They're just recycled ideas from the past 300 years. But sometimes these modern approaches to the Bible just are coming at it with a different approach to literature than perhaps the old approach to the Bible. But the ideas are basically the same. It's questioning the same doctrines. So in short, the answer is yes, there is always a risk in the church amongst Christians who profess the faith, and oftentimes who profess to believe the Bible. There is a danger that in the name of trying to be relevant or trying to be culturally sensitive, that we start to file off the tough edges. We try to water down the message to make it less offensive to people, to make it more palatable. And in actually thinking we are serving God or serving the cause of Christianity, we are actually destroying it, and we are actually in the grip of idolatry. And the end result has only ever been in the history of the church, in the last 2,000 years, when that happens, the end result is only the diminution and destruction of the faith, not its blessing.